Hello and welcome. I'm Geraldine Wilkins, the Living Water Quilter. Welcome to Quilt Conversations Live. Hello, Lori. Aloha. How are you? So glad that you're here. Hello, Diane from Queensland, Australia. Welcome. And Cassie, who's in Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome, ladies. I'm so excited to be with you. Can you believe it's August? Half of the summer is, well, gone, and kids, students are ready to go back to school already. How does time go by so quickly? How is your summer going? Let us know what you've been up to. What have you been working on? Have you been doing family vacation time? Have you been working on quilt projects? Let us know what you're up to in the chat. What have I been up to? I've been up to a lot. I've been putting together a lot of different resources just for you. Hello, Chris from Ventura, California. Welcome, welcome. So glad that you're here. We're going to talk about something that I think it was Terry Green brought up in our last session. She talked about how she has a challenge going from her practice quilting, free motion quilting, to putting designs in a quilt. I wanted to let you know that I listen. I listen to those things and I want to help you. I want to help you. So glad that we can get together to have a conversation about the different challenges that we both face. I don't always know how to quilt a quilt. Raise your hand in the chat. Do you sometimes get stuck and don't know what to put in your finished quilt when it's time to quilt it? What quilting technique to use? What pattern to use? It's a challenge, right? How do we go from practice to a real quilt? Hello, Jane. Welcome. So glad that you're here. And hello, Lori. Welcome, welcome from Valencia, Pennsylvania. So glad that you ladies are here. So Cassie said she vacationed in Texas and survived the hurricane. Cassie, that was terrible. Parts of Texas were without power for weeks. My brother was one of them. He had a generator for at least 2 weeks, but it was just enough to supply electricity to a few things. It was still very hot. Some of his neighbors had to leave town because they did not have electricity because the temperatures and the humidity was just too hot to bear. So yeah, hey Patricia, so glad that you're here. All right, keep getting disconnected. Any ideas? I'm not sure. Now, when you say disconnected, are you talking about the internet connection? Are you talking about the YouTube? Not sure. Hello, Giselle. How are you? So glad that you're here. Welcome, welcome. Yes, Cassie, you were 5 days without power. Yeah, a lot of people were without power for days. My brother was without power for almost 2 weeks. Hello, Lorraine. How are you? So glad that you're here. So, we're going to talk about how to go from practice to quilt. First, let's talk about practice. For those of you who have been to Quilt Conversations Live, you know that I say what? Practice, practice, practice. But what does that look like? Now, I'm not going to go into all the specifics. We'll touch on a few. If you're new here, you can search the YouTube Quilt Conversations Live library. There is a session where I went through multiple ways to go through practice. I think we went through like maybe 10 different ways we can practice. A lot of times, a lot of us are short on time when it comes to practice. And if we set aside time specific to practice, often it never happens because we don't have time to practice. We need to finish our projects. So I like to encourage you to practice in every project. Yes, we still have to practice, but we can also supplement our practice in each project. So, hey, Ren, so glad that you're here. Welcome, welcome. So, let's talk about free motion quilting practice. Of course, this can apply to ruler quilting, it can apply to walking foot quilting, but specifically with ruler quilting, the first thing that we want to practice, and I always say this, is to practice with paper and pen or whiteboard. And I love to practice with a whiteboard. And sometimes I'll use paper, it just depends, but most often I'm using a whiteboard, a small mini one. And then I found at the dollar store these sheets. It's a peel off sheet that you can stick on anywhere, but it's a whiteboard. So it's very thin, it's like paper thin. It's not as heavy as a physical whiteboard, but it's the same properties, which I love. But before I do that, let me go first. I forgot, I want to give some updates for you. Let's do the updates first. Updates. Some of you are already in the alphabet design course. If you are in the alphabet design course, you know for 3 different sessions, we had 3 different Zoom classes. They were all the same. You had a choice to pick one of the 3, or you could attend all 3, but essentially it was the same. It was about making sure you're setting up your machine for free motion quilting success. And we went through the materials, the tools, the machine setup. We went through tension, and we learned some tips along the way. And you got a guide that you downloaded and could print out for all the steps, 8 steps. We had a good time. Then we had a Q&A. And ladies who are in the alphabet course, that is now in the course. I took the last session and put it together for you as a separate video. So all you have to do is go back to the course, look for the section where it says machine setup, but you'll also see in brackets new. So there's a new video from our live Zoom class. And for those of you who are not in the alphabet class, the Zoom class that they attended was a bonus class. It was a bonus class for alphabet design students. So go back, sign in, log in, look under curriculum. And if you look for quickly the word new, it's going to stand out. So the Zoom session that we had, the last one, is now a replay video of how to set up your machine for success. And it includes this downloadable guide. Now, what if you're not in the alphabet class? What if you're not in that course? If you want access to this guide and the video, you can get it. It's available. Just go to my website. It's a separate standalone course, how to set up your machine for free motion quilting success. It covers tension. It covers the settings on your machine. It's really a good resource. And the price is very, very, very low so that it's accessible to any and everyone. So I think Lori was in one of those sessions, right, Lori? And who else was in there? Let's see who else is live with us that was in the class. Well, there was a lot of ladies that came to those free sessions. Now that free sessions is available for those who are not in the alphabet class, you are welcome to go and get that resource. And if you are new to Quilt Conversations Live or my online classes, they're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, unlimited access. So you can always go back to it, always refer to it. It becomes a part of your quilting library, if you will. All right, so that's one thing that's new. So go check that out. And I think Lori put a link in the chat. And if you're on Facebook, I did put a comment with my website at the very top of the comments. So if you want to go check that out and see what that is. So that's brand new. Setting up your machine for success. And then we talked about the Quilt As You Go. So how do both of these relate to today's topic? They do. They relate because we need to practice. And you know I'm talking about free motion quilting practice, right? Free motion practice to quilt. How do we go from practice to quilt? And first we have to really know how to set up our machine. That's the most important thing. We don't want to spend what limited time we have fussing about with our machine. We want to know that we know how to set up our machine. Once we go there, then we have to find ways to practice. And practicing with a quilt as you go is a fun way to do it. It's fast piecing. Then you get to quilt in the piecing, meaning the strips, or you get to quilt over the whole thing. And it's a small project, it's a runner. So, one of the patterns that you learn in the Quilt As You Go course, which is another new course on the website, Quilt As You Go, it's a new course, another opportunity to practice, right? We're going from practice to quilt, and we need to quilt in real things. So we start small. We can't go from a little bit of free motion quilting practice to a big quilt. It's too big of a leap. Too big of a leap. So, how many of you have been watching the Olympics? Hasn't it been amazing? These athletes have been training for years in preparation of the Olympics. Think of all the athletes who did not make it, but they trained hard. They trained. They got up early. They stayed up late. They went without. They did a lot of sacrificing to reach a certain level. If we want to reach a certain level in our quilting, what do we have to do? We have to train or what? Practice. So one way that I like to practice, let's go to my overhead camera. This is one of the designs that you learn in the Quilt As You Go. Now, although the Quilt As You Go class is about quilting strips as you go for a table runner, you also get free motion quilting designs so that you can practice your free motion quilting. And this is one of the designs. This was actually a practice piece that is now embroidered with the words practice, practice, practice. But it's also now my machine cover. So there's different parts of my machine cover where I took practice pieces and I put some embroidery on it. And nothing is ever a waste when we practice, right? We can always use our practice pieces for something. In this case, I like to use it for my machine covers. So this is the cover for my large sit-down, Bernina sit-down long arm. So this is one of the designs. And why did I stitch this out to practice it? I practiced before I went to the fabric. I went to I went to my whiteboard. This is a whiteboard that I mentioned. It's called Wallpaper. It's at the dollar store. It's a sheet. It's a little bit bigger than 8.5 by 11. And I can use a whiteboard marker on it. So before I went to fabric, I practiced connected triangles to learn the design, which way to go, how to stitch. That's what I have to do. Before those Olympians ended up in Paris, they had hours and hours of practice of doing the same thing over and over and over again. Right? Over and over again. Practice, practice, practice. So I did this on paper or whiteboard over and over again. Right? What else have I told you? How many different sizes do we practice our free motion quilting? How many sizes? Who remembers? I bet you Lori remembers. Maybe even Cassie remembers. How many sizes do we practice our free motion quilting? I'll give you a hint. Right? Small, medium, and large. And 3. Yes, Eileen. Hi, how are you? So glad that you're here. So I'm going to practice connected triangles in 3 different sizes, right? I'm going to practice it small. I'm going to practice it medium. because I'm training myself on how to fit the space, small spaces, medium-sized spaces, meaning sashing, borders, and large might be an edge to edge, right? So 3 different sizes, 1, 2, 3. Hey, Jacqueline, so glad that you're here. Welcome, welcome. Exactly. So 3 different sizes. Then after I do that, I'm ready to go to my quilt sandwich. And it's never a waste to go to a large quilt sandwich. Where's the piece at? Here it is. I tend to stitch half of a fat quarter. That's what I'll do. This is half of a fat quarter that is now part of a cover for my machine. Now, why did I stitch this? Yes, I was having fun and playing with free motion quilting, but I was also preparing for a real quilt, a big quilt. Maybe some of you have seen it before. Let's see if you've seen it before. So here is that fabric sandwich that is now a part of my machine cover. This is a photograph of it before I put the embroidery on. This is my practice session. It ended up in this quilt 3 times 3. 3 times 3. This is a quilt I designed and made during a challenge for Island Boutique Fabrics. And because I have been practicing, right, I am ready to stitch in the quilt. But this is still a new pattern for me. It's still a new free motion quilting pattern. So if you remember what I've said in the past, if we're going to incorporate something new in our quilt that we are still learning, it's not going to be a big part of the quilt. It's going to be a smaller section of the quilt so that we still get to practice, but we don't make it a huge commitment. So how many of you remember this quilt? This is 3 times 3. I designed it back in 2019, I think it was, 2019. Thank you. I'm glad that you like it. Thank you so much. So what did I do? Who remembers when I've said that when we quilt something, because we want to go from practice to quilt, that we want to incorporate one pattern that we know and love and we know we can stitch. Most of the quilt is going to be with that pattern. The second thing is something that we are practicing or learning to get better at. Then the third thing is something new. Aha, thank you, Wilda, you remember it. Now, this quilt, I think I did the wrong one. Let me do this one first. All right, this one first. We'll go back to the other photo in just a moment. Here is a little bit more of this quilt. It contains 2 patterns, one that I was trying to get better at. It's in most of the quilt. I did some straight line quilting, which a lot of us can do with a walking foot or ruler or a ruler, acrylic ruler. And then connected triangles is in this as well. Connected triangles. This quilt has all the elements that I'm talking about when it goes from practice to quilt. I practice on whiteboard. I practiced 3 different scales of the pattern. Then I went to a quilt sandwich. And then next, I was ready to begin putting it in a quilt, but a little bit of it, not a big quilt, a section of the quilt. Okay? This quilt ended up being accepted into QuiltCon several years ago. It hung at QuiltCon in, I think it was Arizona, Phoenix, back in 2020, I think it was. No, it couldn't have been 2020 because it was canceled. I forget what, I think it was 2019. I forget what year it was. It was 2019. Yes, 2019, because in 2020 it ended up being on the cover of Curated Quilts magazine. They did a black and white issue. This is my first cover for one of my quilts. But this quilt was born out of my desire to improve my quilting, to go from practice to a real quilt. Okay? Yes, QuiltCon is coming up. It is. Does every quilt end up becoming a magazine cover or going into a quilt show? No, that doesn't always happen. Thank you, Rochelle. Appreciate that. Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you. But the process still stands. I still do that. I still practice. I have a sequence of how I get from practice to a real quilt. I do it incrementally. I don't jump from stitching, learning about a pattern, trying to stitch it without practicing, and then putting it inside a big quilt. That's a big leap. That's like saying, hey, Wilda, Rochelle, Cassie, I'm going to learn gymnastics. Guess what? I took a gymnastics class. I learned how to walk on that narrow beam. It was on the floor. It wasn't up in the air, but I still did it. I'm going to go try out for the Olympics. Right? I don't do that. If I was an athlete, I would take time to practice before I even would think about attempting to try out for any event. I would learn the technique, practice the technique, and then I would start with a local event, a regional event, then a national event before I go to a worldwide event. So, incremental, that's what it takes to go from practice to quilt. So, I want to encourage you to go little by little. If you make this a part of your regular routine, right? Regular routine. You're in the car on a trip and you have your book, you're doodling free motion quilting designs, right? And then when you get home, that doodle that you did on paper, you're now going to take it to a practice sandwich. And you did it. Like, wow, that turned out pretty good. The next quilt I make, I'm going to put a little bit of this in this quilt. I'm going to put it all in the border. Next time, I'm going to put it inside a block. Each block in this quilt is going to be quilted differently with something that I've been practicing. One of the ladies here at Quilt Conversations Live, Terry, remember Terry Green? I don't know if she's here tonight. She did that. She quilted a quilt with, I think it was 25 different blocks, and each block she challenged herself to quilt something different. That quilt ended up going into several quilt shows. And she did it, mind you, she did it afraid. She didn't know how it was going to turn out, just like I didn't know how 3 times 3 was going to turn out. But I put in the work, right? I put in the work. Oh, Terry's not here today, not so far. Maybe she'll watch the replay. Hey, Terry, if you're watching the replay. So glad that you're here. I love to talk about your determination to go from practice to quilt. You did it afraid. So, what happens when we start to go from free motion quilting, doodling, to quilting sandwiches? Now we're ready for those real quilts, those small projects, those tote bags, the table runner. Remember the Quilt As You Go table runner? Remember this? This is an example of a small step toward a big quilt. This is my practice. You're looking at what I did as a young free motion quilter. I've been free motion quilting since 2008. And I was experimenting with first decorative stitching, and then I did the same runner again above in red, and I added free motion quilting, one strip at a time. If we quilt our projects based on the patchwork piecing, we get more practice in, and it's a small space. It's easier on a home machine, which is where these were quilted. These were quilted on a home machine. One patchwork piece at a time. So I can say I'm going to stitch a feather, which I'm learning how to stitch. I'm going to practice on a separate quilt sandwich. Then I'm going to come to my runner and do one strip with one feather. I'm getting my practice in. I'm improving because I'm putting it in something real. When we put it in a real runner or a mini quilt, it helps to slowly build our confidence for the big quilt. If we start with a big quilt without the practice that I mentioned, I recommend you do beforehand, you get nervous. At least I do. I get nervous. Can I do it? How's it going to turn out? If I don't know how to set up my machine correctly for free motion, that's the other thing. Every single time we practice, we are refining how we set up our machine for free motion. We begin to know what our machine sounds like when it's happy, when it's going to produce the results that we want. We get to practice tension and practice thread. All of this is working and building your muscle as a machine quilter. Okay, let's go to this. This was the photo that I used for this session, right? This is another one of those quilts that was to help me practice my free motion quilting. I practice, of course, all ahead of time on whiteboard and paper, but there must come a time where we put it in the quilt. This is a mini quilt. It's not big. It's 9 blocks, and it's called the Quilter's Canvas. The whole idea was to mimic in a quilt a whole cloth or a quilt sandwich. So that means that center block is center patchwork piece is huge compared to the strips around it. But it creates a beautiful canvas to feature free motion quilting. So it's called Quilter's Canvas because it's an opportunity for us to play. It becomes a playground for free motion quilting. And all of this is quilted with, guess what? The alphabet. Different characters from the alphabet, the shapes, are used to help tell a story about sea, sand, and surf. So the letter C becomes waves. The letter S becomes the waves that you see coming from the sun, right? And little itty bitty circles or O's are grains of sand. All throughout this, I basically stitched like 4 or 5 different patterns based on the letter over and over again in one mini quilt. It's about 36 by 36, 3 blocks across, 3 blocks down. They're 12-inch blocks. It's a fabulous way to practice. This is called Quilter's Canvas. Now, of course, it can be a table runner, or it could be a big quilt. This is a brand new course. Brand new. It's an opportunity to put what you learn in the alphabet course in a table runner, a mini quilt, or a big lap quilt. Once you learn how to make the block, you can add as many blocks as you want to make any size project you want. This is a pre-release or an early release of the course. I'm still stitching out the 9 free motion quilting pattern tutorials for the course. So if you get the course this weekend, you save $20 with the pre-release of the course, the early release. This gives you an opportunity to make the quilt top, to think about what designs you want to start practicing to put in, especially if you're in the alphabet course. If you're not in the alphabet course, you can put in what you know, or as you start to think about what designs that you want to learn, you can go and look at the different designs that will be in the course. And I'll show you some of them right now with the overhead camera. Let's look at it. So this is one of the designs that's going to be in the course, this one here. And what else? Not that one. Is it this one? Nope, I didn't bring. Oh, it is in the other room. It's over by my other machine. Let's see. So the whole point is we want to go from what? Practice to a real quilt. Are you committed to practicing? Committed to doing a whiteboard or paper, doodling? Are you committed to quilting in a big fat quarter or half of a fat quarter? All right, good night, Wilda. Hello, Brenda. So glad that you're here from Michigan. Welcome, welcome. So I have created these resources for multiple steps to help you get to the big quilt. The first thing is knowing your machine, knowing thread and needles. So that was released this week. We had a free Zoom class for all the alphabet students to make sure that they know how to set up their machine for success. And many of you were in that class. You had 3 opportunities to take that free class. Now, for those who are not in the alphabet, it's now a low-cost class to get you started to set up your machine. Make sure you know how to test for tension. Because a lot of us, okay, let me know in the chat, how many of you are afraid to adjust your tension? Have you had problems adjusting the tension on your machine? Let me know. I like to know, do you have problems setting up tension? If you do, then you want to take this course on how to set up your machine for success. 8 steps. In it, you learn step by step how to adjust your tension so that you can master tension and not allow it to master you. Take time to learn your machine. Then you're practicing, you're doodling. Now you're already quilting inside your sandwich, right? You know how to stitch this machine pattern. You're ready for real quilts. You're going to start small though. And so I've given you an opportunity with the table runner, Quilt As You Go. That's one option. If you think it's not for you, you need something bigger or different, the Quilter's Canvas is for you. The Quilter's Canvas is an opportunity to take a easy to make block that has a big canvas to practice your free motion quilting. Another opportunity. It will include 9 new designs. For those who are in the alphabet course, you can use the designs that you're learning from the course. And I like to think of it as a time to think of a storyline. For mine, it was sand, sea, and surf. How could I make designs or take designs that represent that story? You pick a story, any story you want, and use that as inspiration for quilting it. That is another way to do it. Going back to 3 times 3, let's go back here, This is again that example where I took 2 designs, one that I was incorporating in every single quilt for an entire year because I wanted to get better at stitching it. It's a background fill that I can use behind applique. I can use it in negative space. I can use it edge to edge. It's a beautiful design. I love it. Then I also incorporated something new. I want you to be able to do the same, to go from practice to a real quilt and quilt it as little or as much as you want. Let's see. Let me go back to what challenges do you have? Let me know in the chat. What challenges do you have when it comes time to pick a design for your quilt? Is it because you know only one technique, walking foot quilting or ruler quilting or free motion? Is it you only have a couple of designs that you know how to stitch? What is your challenge? Is it your machine setup? Is that why it's difficult to go from practice to quilt? Maybe you lack time. You just don't have enough time to do all the things that you want. I know I don't. There's so many things on my list that I want to do that it's rare that I get to do the things that are on the list, right? I knock them out one by one, but granted, you know what? Most of the time is creating resources for you to help you get better, to help you finish your quilts, and to have fun doing it. Let me know in the chat if you have any challenges with going from practice to quilt. I want to see where you are. Let me know. Let's see. Lori says, hey, hey, Terry, we were talking about you earlier. We were using your quilt as an example a couple years ago when you quilted every single block differently to challenge yourself with free motion quilting. And I mentioned how you did it afraid, but you're so glad that you did, and that the quilt ended up being in multiple quilt shows as a result. We're so glad that you're here. So practice the quilt. Terry said, I am going to commit to quilting each block and move myself to the next step. Yay. So Lori says, tense times adjusting tension for projects, fear. I keep getting back to the, let me see. I'm sorry, Lori. I can't get it back to where it was for project 1. Tension times adjusting the tension for project 2, and then I fear, okay. So she makes a valid point. There are 2 things that could limit going from practice to quilt, and one is tension. In the Set Up Your Machine for Success class, that was a free Zoom class, but now it's available for those who are not in the alphabet course. Go check that out because I go through in detail how to adjust tension. I do it in the class. I show you on my machine how I'm adjusting the tension and testing the tension until it's right. Step by step by step. And I will do that same test every single time I sit at my machine ready to free motion quilt, whether it's practice or a real quilt. I have a systematic process so that when I start to quilt my quilt, I don't have tension problems. I don't have other issues because I've taken 15 to 20 minutes to make sure my thread's not breaking, to have a fresh needle, doing my systematic tension test. Lori, you were there. You saw that tension test. Try that process. Go back into the course. Look under the curriculum. Terry, you just joined us. There's a new video in the course about setting up your machine for success. And in that video, I show my entire process for tension, step by step. And I do that every single time. And I do it until I get good tension. Then I give you a tip on how to master tension, all in the video. Go check it out, Terry. And Lori, I know what it's like. If we let a project sit, then we get back to it and we're trying to figure out, where was I? It's like starting over. And that's sad to say, it's hard to avoid unless you take notes at the end of a session, knowing that you won't get back to it for a few weeks, so that when you do get back, you can read the note and say, I was trying to adjust the tension for this new thread that I want to put in the quilt. And you say in the note exactly where you left off. It could be that the needle was the wrong size and the thread was breaking, or the thread was shedding, or there was some other thing that you were trying to overcome. Maybe it was you're practicing a new free motion quilting design and you were getting stuck at a certain part of the design. Terry says, just do it as Nike says. I like that. Yeah. All right, let me go to Rochelle's question. My biggest challenge is remembering to slow down. I have a heavy foot, no patience. Okay. All right. Yay. Oh, so Terry, have you already seen the new video that's in the class? You enjoyed that exercise? Okay, good. I'm glad. All right. Let's see. The next question is, Rochelle, slow down. Hopefully there's a little voice on your shoulder. That's me saying slow down. All right. Terry says the red color choice is sometimes difficult, but Dina taught us how to pull a thread. Yep, lay them on the quilt. All right. Yes, I do that every single time. This is earlier I was talking about and using the Olympics as an analogy. Now, we all don't strive to be Olympians, right? We don't all want to be expert quilters, but what we do want to do is eliminate or minimize the fear we have associated with quilting our projects. And some of those fears involve selecting threads, selecting thread weights, machine tension and setup, things like that, how to choose a design. The more we create a process, step-by-step process for these things, the less stress or fear we will have with it. So in the machine setup class, I give you my process for tension. I do that every single time. You may not want to do that. It's not that I enjoy doing that, but I prefer to do that over using a seam ripper. I prefer to do that over using a seam ripper. Same thing goes with the thread, which Terry mentioned, that I show it exactly how to step by step to choose thread for your quilts. I do that every single time. Does it sometimes not work? Of course, but it's a process. If it doesn't work, I say, why didn't it work? And then I change my process, right? So Lori says she just reviewed her handouts again. Fantastic. Ladies who are brand new to Quilt Conversations Live, Terry, Lori, and others, they have been here at Quilt Conversations Live for a couple of years now, from the early beginning. And then they're also students in the alphabet design course. So let's see. And let's see. Deborah says, hello there, everyone. Hand pink waving. Hello. Great to have you here, Deborah. Yes, keep Mr. Ripper in the drawer. I wish I could. Hey, Brenda, welcome. So glad that you're here. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. So we're talking about, if you're brand new, these sessions are usually conversations to help us, wherever you are, whatever level quilter you are, to go to the next step. Ask a question, participate in the chat. Especially, I have to say, on YouTube, you ladies who are on YouTube are always having these side conversations because we're helping one another, right? So already Nicole is talking about listening to smooth jazz while she's quilting in the YouTube chat. So ladies, practice to quilt. The ladies who are in my alphabet class, let us know in the chat. Are you doing it? Are you implementing these steps? Step by step. Are you learning new designs every year? I hope you are. Are you incorporating them in your quilt projects little by little? Are you getting better? The only way to get better is to practice, right? Practice, practice, practice. And I was going to share this analogy about the Olympians and how we're not striving to be Olympians, but we are, in a sense, you've heard me say this before, athletes, because we practice. We want to continually practice. When I don't quilt, whether it's piecing, free motion quilting, or ruler quilting, if I have a big gap of time in between those sessions, sometimes it's like starting all over again. It's not starting at zero if I have a long history of doing something, but it does mean that I kind of forgotten my rhythm, right? We all have a rhythm of how we make and sew and quilt. Do you remember when you first started and learned how to make a quilt, how to do a 1/4 inch seam? It wasn't easy in the beginning, right? But now over time, you've gotten better and better. And once you got better at a 1/4 inch seam, you ventured out into curve piecing or into foundation paper piecing. You start to learn different techniques. And I want to encourage you with machine quilting, specifically going from walking foot quilting to free motion and ruler quilting. Once we are able to do all three of those, your quilting will explode. You will have quilts that incorporate multiple techniques, and you will feature different types of thread. You will also incorporate perhaps some hand stitching. But what do we have to do? Practice, practice, practice. Hey, Teresa. So glad that you're here. Welcome, welcome. This is Teresa Johnson, who used to live in my area in Virginia, right? Is this Teresa? Because there's a couple of Teresa Johnson. Teresa, I think you are the one who took this photo for me. Do you remember this? Do you remember this photo? Teresa took this photo for me at QuiltCon. I wasn't at the show, and she did it for me. Yes, Teresa, thank you. I don't always get to go to shows that my quilts are in. All right, Jacqueline, she is working on rulers and free motion. Awesome in her current project. I'm excited. I want to see that, Jacqueline. Jacqueline is another student in the alphabet course, and she submits her progress in the course so that we can have a conversation and help her get to the next step. Yes, Teresa. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, what's coming up? What is coming up? You ladies know that I'm teaching ruler quilting. Remember, I mentioned multiple techniques, how that's going to expand the results. You're going to have an option to quilt your projects with multiple techniques as you add them, little by little, right? And ruler quilting, as you know, is one of my favorite machine quilting techniques. And I love to help you one ruler at a time. And this is called the snowflake template. It's a template that allows us to connect dots, a straight line and then a dot and then a straight line and a dot. And there's so many ways that we can do it. I love to teach technique classes and then ultimately show you how you can take this one ruler and use it to quilt in borders and sashing, to quilt in a block, and to quilt edge to edge. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like the process of going from practice to quilt? Remember, when we are starting anything new, we're starting small. sashing and borders are small. Small commitment, small space. We go from that to a quilt block with a technique. From there, we go to the big quilt. So whether it's free motion quilting or ruler quilting, we are learning it a little at a time, learning how to fill the space of a quilt with ruler quilting one section at a time. So that's what I want to help you with. If you are ready to learn acrylic ruler quilting, I hope you'll join me at the Pennsylvania National Quilt Extravaganza. If you haven't heard, it's coming up. It's next month, September the 12th to the 15th. 3 different acrylic ruler quilting classes. This is a quilt that was quilted very quickly, edge to edge, all random with one acrylic ruler. You can do this on your home machine or on a long arm. Sit down is what I use, sit down long arm. Learn how to use acrylic rulers to change the way you quilt. If you do it, like I said, remember the process. Learn it for borders, for sashing, for blocks, and for edge to edge. No matter what project you have an arsenal of designs, techniques that you can use to quilt your project. This was designed for a quilt magazine, and the emphasis was on the quilt pattern, not the quilting. So the edge-to-edge design was perfect for this. Not a lot of custom quilting. That's not always necessary, right? So this is called connecting the dots or connect the dots. The next class, which is amazing, ladies. How many of you have even thought about quilting hexagon designs in your projects? Hexagons or hexi quilts are very popular. A lot of ladies like to hand sew hexes, right? But we can also quilt them. Thank you, Lori, for sharing the information. This is available at quiltfest.com. If you want to come and join me in these classes, I'm going to show you how, with one template, a hexagon template, how to make beautiful hexagon patterns for, again, what? Sashing, borders, blocks, and edge to edge. So this is another hexagon-based design, another edge-to-edge design. I want to help you succeed with hexagon quilting. And we're going to do it on a home machine. Home machine. This is why it's so important. If you have not mastered how to set up your machine for free motion quilting, you are limiting your ability to go from practice to quilt. Perhaps you want to learn acrylic ruler quilting. If you take time to learn how to set up your machine for free motion quilting, you have set up your machine for ruler quilting. The only difference is that you change the foot. You go from a free motion foot to a ruler foot. And then when you come to my class, I show you techniques for creating designs that are sashing, border, block base, and edge to edge. I help you get the most out of your rulers. There's this lady who commented on a video recently on my YouTube channel, and she says she has dozens of rulers that she's never used. And there are a number of reasons why that is. How many of you have rulers that you saw at a quilt show or some demo and you haven't used it yet? We haven't taken time to learn, or maybe we don't know how to set up our machine for ruler quilting. I want to help you get that set up. Thank you, Lori. Lori is our amazing chat moderator on YouTube. I thank you, Lori, for sharing the resources in the chat. Feel free, ladies, if you have questions, to let us know. And so this is the hexagon class. And the beginner class that many, many ladies love, it's called Power Lines. Power Lines is going to help you learn the basics with acrylic ruler quilting. I'm going to show you, just like in all the other classes, but in this one, it's kind of dipping your toe in acrylic ruler quilting to see if it's something for you. Again, we take one ruler, straight edge, gentle curve, and we learn how to stitch beautiful straight edge and curve designs, straight lines and curves. And we learn how to use the lines on the ruler to do it. I wish I could use my own machine for that class. Learning how to set it up a machine that is not my own may not translate. Oh, that's a good comment. Thank you for sharing that. You know what? It still translates. Yes, I get the idea that you want to do it on your own machine, but most machines, I shouldn't say most, all machines have very similar things. They all have a needle, right? They all have feed dogs. They all have tension. And then they all have some kind of ruler foot. So once you learn how to set up your machine for free motion quilting, when you take the class, I show you the ruler quilting techniques. So if you want to learn how to set up your machine separate from the class, I recommend you take my online course, the one I just released for setting up your machine for success for free motion quilting, which also would apply for ruler quilting. So once you learn how to set up your machine for free motion, it's the same for ruler quilting. In these classes, we learn the ruler quilting techniques that will apply to any machine. Any machine. Yes, Lorraine. Lorraine is another one of those who has many rulers but has not had time to use them. But she uses a lot of them. She likes the clamshells, she likes the circles, and the waves. Awesome. Straight edge quilting can be very impactful. Here are two separate designs, a star and an arrow. Those two were put together in the orange quilt sandwich above to create one unified design, alternating from one square or block to the next. Straight lines, all done with an acrylic ruler with very little to no marking on your quilt sandwich. Ah, Terry loves the Hexie ruler. Yeah, I like it too. It's one of my favorites. I'm going to go back to it. The Hexie ruler is fantastic. This is a 3-ruler set. 3-ruler set. And so in this particular design, this edge to edge that you see here, let me go back to the beginning on this one. Here we go. I added 2 different sizes in this one design to get this look. And I show you how to do this in the class. It's so easy to do. So easy to do. And you can see a little bit of that in this video. This is me stitching out this design. And I show you this in the class. So I hope you can join me. If you can come to Pennsylvania, I would love for you to join us. It will be an amazing time to learn basic techniques that are transferable to your machine. All right, ladies, I think that's everything that I wanted to show you tonight. So yes, Eileen, thank you for your comment about taking the class. Yeah, it is a long drive. I understand that. For me, it's without traffic. It's I think 4 hours from where I am. I'm in Virginia. I'm going to drive so that I can take more with me instead of flying. But I know it's going to be longer than 4 hours because there's always traffic on 95. It's always longer. Yeah, Lorraine, the Hexie ruler is fun. The hexie ruler is fun, and I can't wait. I already have a quilt that I want to quilt with the hexie, but I'm doing my process. I'm practicing first, right? Paper. Now, when I design on paper with pencil. Then I go to the quilt sandwich. Yeah. Ah, thank you, Lori. The cruise. I almost forgot. Thank you, Lori. That's why you are the moderator. The cruise. Yay. Guess what, ladies? We are at 47 cruisers, quilting cruisers. We have a capacity for 60. That means there's still room for you. It's November. It's a 9-day cruise to the Caribbean. There are 6 classes to choose from. 6 classes. If you're brand new to Quilt Conversations Live, I have the pleasure of joining Latifa Safir and Guyleen Fitzgerald as quilting instructors for this quilt retreat at sea. We each are sharing 2 machine classes and 1 hand class. There is a video here on YouTube, actually 2, where I interviewed Latifa and she shares her projects, and I interviewed Guyleen and she shares her projects. So go check them out. It's under the Quilt Conversations Live playlist or the podcast, YouTube podcast playlist. Just go to the livingwaterquilter.live to get to the YouTube channel, and you can watch those interviews and see the projects. Yes, they should. You ladies, if you belong to a guild and you would like me to present a Zoom class, I would love to do that. Mention me, Living Water Quilter, Geraldine Wilkins. I have all the information on my website, which is right here, machinequilting.live, and you can learn about my virtual events. And of course, my brother has a habit of calling me whenever I'm live. I'm going to message him and say, I'll call you back. So, ladies, any additional questions before I sign off? It's been fun. I hope you got some tips on how to go from practice to quilt. If you want the extensive conversation, again, go to the Living Water Quilter YouTube channel, go to Quilt Conversations Live playlist, and there is a conversation about several ways. I think I go through about 10 different ways that you can practice your quilting. Guilty as charged. There's my brother in the chat now on Facebook. By the way, did you know Quilt Conversations Live is a show that's sponsored? It's sponsored by my business, Living Water Quilter, and by AJS Investigations, which is my brother's company. He helps different companies do investigative work for law firms, for other types of companies that need investigative background checks and such. He is an amazing person. He is a retired law enforcement officer out of Texas. He is a military veteran, U.S. Army. I am so very proud of him. He has forever served his community in some way. He has served the U.S. through his service with the Army. He has served in his community as a police officer. And he now is serving his community in his neighborhood. When they had the power outage, he was the one who stayed behind and watched those who left after the hurricane. And they would call him and text him, is there power yet? Is there power yet? He's also on hand to help his neighbors with their animals. My brother is amazing. Good night, Eileen. So glad that you were here. And yes, thank you. Oh, sweet. I love you too, brother. He's my big baby brother. He's younger than me, but he's my big brother. Oh, yes. Everyone's saying thank you for your service. Yes. Yes, thank you. So sweet, ladies. All right, well, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And don't forget, all of these new courses are on the homepage. Go to machinequilting.live. If you want the quilter's canvas in the pre-release, you save $20. Remember, $20 off, and it's only this weekend. Use Quilters 20. I want you ladies to go from practice to quilt and start doing it in real quilts, okay? I'll see you next time for another Quilt Conversations Live, and I can't wait for those who are going to join me on the quilting cruise and at the show in Pennsylvania. So many opportunities for us to get together so that we can help each other grow in our quilting techniques and also as a community. I'll see you next time for another Quilt Conversations Live. And don't forget, if you're brand new, like the video if you're on YouTube, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. If you're on Facebook, follow the Living Water Quilter page, give this video a thumbs up, and share it. Don't keep Quilt Conversations Live a secret. Share it with your quilting friends. Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend. Bye, Teresa. You're welcome. You're welcome. Good night, Cassie. Good night. You're welcome, Terry. Good night, everyone.